So they call this thing the balloon party, and that means that Tim McKernan is supposed to be here, but he's not. He is on a well-deserved vacation. So my name is Dan McLaughlin. I'm filling in for Tim McKernan, and I really don't want to talk baseball. It hasn't been a great season. Hockey, okay. We'll get there shortly, but we're going to talk golf in this hour, and I've got Jay Delsing, one of the most remarkable players to come out of St. Louis. At one point, world ranking of 51st, and a guy that loves to talk golf, and he was on the opening drive today. And we also have Nick Ragone in studio. Nick Ragone, you hear that name all the time. He heads up the Ascension Charity Classic, so a lot of talk about that and a lot of talk about the world of golf for the next hour. Guys, thanks for coming in studio. We certainly appreciate it.
Danny, St. Louis loves you, misses you, needs you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well,
I'm down with that. I'm down with that.
Hey, they get me on the balloon party. You know when you made it, you are on the balloon party. So it's good to be back. Good to be back behind the mic. I'll be filling in a week from today on the Drive Time Show with Stoltz. So it's always fun to talk sports with everybody around town and with you guys as well. I want to get into, just right off the bat, the Ascension Charity Classic. We're going to talk golf, generally speaking, for the entire hour. But Ascension Charity Classic, it's hard to believe, Nick, it's really not that far away.
You're scaring me, Danny. It's 2 months. No, it's less than 2 months. It's exactly 2 months out. And it's the fun time of year. You know, this is the time of year, Danny, when I start looking at weather charts, which drives my wife crazy because obviously the weather's unpredictable. It's the one variable, and you know this, Jay, the one variable I can't control. I can even control to the most extent the field, and we have a great field this year, and I'll break some news. First 2 years, we didn't have Miguel Angel Jimenez, who's a great European star. He's committed, so he'll be in the field, so we're going to have a great field. But the weather is what I start thinking about this time of year, and you know, which is not healthy for my psyche or for my wife or anybody else, but we were blessed. The first 2 years we had extraordinary weather, and even last year we had some rain overnight, and Mike Knoll did an amazing job. You would have known we had 2 inches of rain in an hour that Saturday night. And so, Danny, thanks for getting me reminded of that and making me nervous, and now I'm going to start looking at my weather charts.
So you said one guy that's going to be a part of it. Is there another guy that you could announce that maybe fans would know that has committed to the Ascension Charity Classic?
Well, if you're talking about Jay Delsing, yes. But
yes.
More importantly, Stuart Sink, I think you're mentioning.
Awesome.
Stuart, who's been playing great golf on the big tour. He just turned 50. He's excited to come out. And we're working on Freddie Couples. You know, I talk about this a lot. Freddie's the one last name, Jay. You know this, and you've played with Freddie. And, you know, it's always comes down to his back and how he's feeling. Freddie can be a little bit fickle. He doesn't just want to get on a plane. Freddie's really the last player we're looking at to be in the field that hasn't been in the field yet. John Daly will be back in the field. We got Stricker, Ernie Els, Bernard Longer, who just won at age 65. He broke Hal Irwin's record. So the field is going to be stacked. But, Jay, if you could put a call into your old buddy Freddie, that would help.
Let's go, Jay Bird.
Come on, Jay.
Lynn Roach is his manager, and it's players group, and it hadn't worked so far in the first 2 years, but I'm not afraid to keep doing it. I would love it. Fred would love this golf course, and I know he loves St. Louis, and he's a huge baseball fan, and that's not a big draw this year. But the golf course in our tournament, the word of mouth throughout the Champions Tour, it's been fantastic.
How's your game, Jay? I know we have a chance to knock it around a little bit. I'm going to give you a little insight, too, Ragone, that Mr. Delsing here is knocking it straight and knocking it long, and he's shooting. Let me tell you this story. We play Norwood. We'll play from the tips. This guy puts up a 66. Then we had a couple events we move up. There's a 64 mixed in there. Jay Bird is putting up numbers.
Are you talking about Williamson or Delsing?
No, I'm talking about Delsing.
Delsing. I wasn't sure which Jay. We have a lot of Jays here.
Jay Haas, too. But
Jay Haas.
Jay Delsing is going to show out, I think, at this year's Ascension Charity Classic. And I do think, hand me that money, will you? That's 100 bones.
That's
Danny's. Oh, my God. I see a Ben Franklin in front of me.
That's Danny's Benjamin. I'm not spending it.
I know you fixed your trick knee. Are you feeling healthy?
I am. It's crazy, but I had a total knee done on my right knee. It'll be 3 years in November, but I've picked up 15 yards with every club in my bag this year. And it's just because I'm able to push off and get over to my left side. So, when I played in the inaugural, and the first shot was still one of the most memorable, if not the most memorable shot I've ever hit in my life. The tips were a reach for me. There were a lot of 4 irons and and now I'm back to hitting more 6s and 7 irons, and that's a huge difference.
That is it. Look, Jay, You putt those greens as well as anybody. I mean, you putt the eyes out of it. If your ball striking is where it can be, I mean, not to put pressure on you, but I think you're going to surprise a lot of people and make some noise. And how great would that be if Saturday, Sunday, you're in the mix? Those crowds, I mean, they were huge. They're going to be insane.
Nick, one of the things, thank you, and I'm excited, and even if I'm not playing well, I'll make some noise. I'll yell and scream and run around the course or something. But one of the things that you and I were talking about, and Danny and I were texting about, was the crowds at the U.S. Open this year at L.A. Country Club were so small, and I'm thinking, our first 2 years, you pick a day at the Ascension Charity Classic in Norwood, and we had way more people than that.
Well, Jay, you grew up playing golf here in St. Louis. You went to UCLA, two-time All-American. Your clubs were number one in the country for 2 different years. My point is, you know L.A. Country Club, which, again, was where the U.S. Open took place. But for both of you guys, you're intimately involved with the PGA Tour. Why, and I'll start with Nick and then go to you, Jay, but why were the crowds so down at the U.S. Open?
2 reasons. One is L.A. is not a great sports town. We know that. Enough said on that. Secondly, the membership bought up a lot of the GA tickets, the general admission, because, and you know this, Jay, it's a very exclusive club, and some would say snooty, and they didn't want the public trampling their course. And the USGA, I think, they want to have U.S. Opens at prime time. That piece works. The problem is L.A. A, is not a great golf town, and B, L.A. Country Club was a lot like Chambers Bay. It wasn't conducive to large crowds. And to Jay's point, and this is a fact, USGA announced on their Sunday they had 22,000 people. 22,000. To put it in context, our Saturday inaugural year, we had 25,000.
It's amazing.
So a Champions Tour event in St. Louis had more people than the U.S. Open on Sunday. That's a reflection of 2 things. One is St. Louis is amazing. We overperformed. But 2 is L.A. dramatically underperformed. And I think it's partly because it's not a great sports town, partly because L.A. Country Club is not a great spectators course. And 3, I think the membership did a real disservice by buying up all the tickets and then sitting on them.
What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, no question about that. And to your point, you know, there's this corporate side of this thing, Nick, that I think the USGA was kind of maxing out, and so they probably got paid because, and you know this better than we do, but you know, you hit the corporate citizens and they have all their skyboxes, and it's a different thing than having a guy and his son walking around, you know, watching golf on Father's Day at the
totally different experience. And you know, typically you want to have a mix, right? At Belle Reve, we had the corporate hospitality. At our event, we have that. But then you want to have a lot of fans there to create that energy. And how many times, Jay, you overheard this? I mean, Ernie Els came up to me and Stricker, even Longer, who's notoriously a grinder, and said, we love these big crowds. We feed off the energy. David Tom said that. The year he won, he said, on the stretch, the back 9 stretch, he made a couple of key birdies, 25-footers. He heard the roars. Jay, you know this. It feeds into your soul. And on the back 9 at the Open, there was a couple bombs that were dropped, and you heard, you know, golf claps. And I'm like, where are the roars?
Yeah.
And majors should have roars. It absolutely impacts the play on the course. And I just thought there was something missing about that Open. You know, it turned out to be a great finish, but it lacked that enthusiasm and energy. And it didn't feel, first of all, the scores were too low. It didn't feel like a U.S. Open.
Here's an LA Open and a Fred Couples story. So Fred has been trying to get in there as a member for years and years. He's a member now. But I remember playing with him shortly after one of his first go-arounds with trying to get in. And he said, you played LA a lot in college. And I said, yeah, it's a great track and super exclusive. And he's like, well, I'm trying to get in there. And I said, did you get in? He said, no. And I said, but he said, I did make it to the interview round. And I said, what's that like? And he said, I sat in front of a table of 5 or 6 gentlemen, somewhere between 60 and 80 years old. And I said, and what did they ask you? And he said, first of all, they asked my name. And I said, my name's Fred Couples. And they said, what do you do?
Oh, you're making this up, Jay.
I'm telling you this.
How is this possible?
And he says, I'm a professional golfer. And the guy goes, you any good? And he goes, 1 in 92 Masters.
I mean,
he still didn't get in.
So none of this computes, but now it makes sense that they had such low turnout, and it's a shame. And here's the kicker to it all is that they have the Open again in 2039.
That's
so
right.
I guess they got 15 years to get the crowd attendance up. But in the USGA's mind, and this is typical USGA, they've already committed to something before knowing the outcome. I think they did the same thing with Chambers Bay, and the USGA has had a run of bad luck going back to Shinnecock. Woodstock, which was a disaster. You had the rules with Dustin Johnson, which was a disaster at Oakmont. You had Chambers Bay, which was a disaster straight up. Erin Hills, which was kind of a disaster. It didn't look or feel like an open. I think Koepka won at 18. You had this one, which didn't feel like an open. The USGA's DNA is the toughest test in golf. And they've gotten away from that. And I think, to me, the Masters and now the Open Championship are the two preeminent majors because you know what you're going to get. Great golf, great crowds, great energy, great heritage. USGA has lost their way.
Nick Ragone is our guest from the Ascension Charity Classic. Jay Delsing, I'm Dan McLaughlin. This is 101 ESPN, the Balloon Party. By the way, the YouTube page is up. And Jay will be featured with Randy Carricker this Sunday on the 101 on Sports. You can also see that on the YouTube page as well. Nick is going to have some great news concerning St. Louis, Tiger Woods, when we come back. This is the Balloon Party. No Tim McKernan, but they call this the balloon party. I guess he's going to be back. Grant, is he back next week? from a well-deserved vacation?
I don't believe he is back next week, so we got some more time to fill.
I'm all over it. Okay, I'm Dan McLaughlin. That is Jay Delsing. And Nick Ragone from the Ascension Charity Classic is with us as well. I mentioned, Nick, some breaking news concerning, kind of breaking news, but if you haven't heard it yet, you had the chance to interact with Rory, Tiger, and that has a direct effect on what may happen with the Champions Tour.
It does. You know, last November, I was at the tour partners meeting and sitting around, about 20 of us, waiting for our last two guests that Jay Monahan had some friends visiting, and it turned out to be Tiger and Rory. And
not bad.
Yeah, not bad. And I instinctively stuck my hand out and shook Tiger's hand as he walked in. We chatted for about at least 7 minutes, and he knew a lot about the Charity Classic. He knew a lot about St. Louis. He said his best experience ever, and this is a quote, in professional golf was Bellerive 2018. Loved the crowds, loved the energy. And he said, when's your tournament again? And I said, it's in September. He goes, oh, man, that's great for my allergies. And I said, what? He goes, my allergies are bad in St. Louis in August, but good in September. And I was like, all right. And then he said, get my cart ready, I'm playing. And then later that night, in front of about 20 people, he said, where's my buddy from St. Louis? I said, I'm here. He goes, get my cart ready. So he said it twice. So the next week, I happened to be playing golf with Rory down in Florida, and he said, hey, man, did you ever lock Tiger into that commitment? And I said to Rory, like, no, we don't. Well, I'm not texting buddies with him. Like, how would I do that? And he goes, well, I'll see him at JT's wedding. I'll remind him. So I said, yeah, you do that. But Tiger has been very public in saying he's going to play the Champions Tour. Now, look, he just had foot surgery and to cure his arthritis. Jay, I think there's a good chance he might not ever play again on the big tour. He's really struggled with his walking.
And people need to understand, Champions Tour, you get a card.
You get,
right.
as he calls it, a buggy.
Yeah.
He wants to get a buggy and play with his friend Freddie again. But he, if you saw at the Masters, he really struggled to walk. I mean, he hit the ball well. He gets the ball speed up to 180 miles an hour, hits it long enough, can't walk. And so I think there's a chance, Danny, he might play the British Open next year as a swan song.
Yeah.
And then he might not play again until the Champions Tour.
Jay, what do you think it would do for the Champions Tour in terms of crowds and the effect that he would have on those crowds? And Nick, you can chime in as well, but I'll start with you, Jay. What do you think it would mean?
Oh, Danny, it'll be something that this tour, the Champions Tour, has never seen before. And if you go to a Champions Tour other than the St. Louis event, there's a smattering of fans here and there. I mean, we're talking about probably
5,000 a day is a good event.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That for us is a Pro-Am day.
I know. It's amazing. And so what we do here in St. Louis is definitely the anomaly. But if you had Tiger playing,
it'll feel like a major, not a PGA Tour event. I mean, the truth is, so in our event, they typically, Champions Tour gets 5,000 a day, which is a good event, by the way. We did close to 50,000. We did 5,000 on Thursday. But if you look at the PGA Tour events, the week after us, the Fortinet, Jay, you saw it on TV. We had much bigger crowds. And I think when Tiger plays here, Danny, it'll feel more than just a PGA Tour event, an elevated event like a Memorial or a Bay Hill where you get 35, 40,000 people a day. That's what we're going to be looking at. And Norwood has the infrastructure to accommodate that because it's a big piece of property. We have 36 holes. We have the infrastructure to deal with that. But it'll feel more like that than just a regular PGA Tour event. And I think it'll have the feel of a major. I mean, you're going to see crowds come out that will not pass Bellerive. Nothing ever will. But it'll look bigger than a U.S. Open for sure.
Nick, one of the things that excites me, because we're on part of the team, and the corporate citizenship in St. Louis, as you spoke of, is just ridiculous and so strong support-wise. But hell, man, we may have the entire golf course with cabanas and skyboxes if he shows up.
We're trending that way. We started off year one with 13 through 18, and then year two we did, I think, 12. And now this year it'll be the whole back nine. We'll soon be going to the front nine, which the Champions Tour doesn't really allow that because you got to get special dispensation because they rarely have a build out more than 17 and 18, right? And you have to get like sort of permission. We're already now pressing up against the front nine, but I guarantee you, when Tiger turns 50, and I think he's going to play 12 to 15 events a year because he could still beat these guys, and he wants to get in the buggy and play, you're going to see us building out pretty much the whole course because we already have 200 corporate sponsors. We have nothing left to sell. I mean, we literally, if you want a Pro-Am, hurry up. We have some Tuesday Pro-Ams left, I think. But, so we would have to start building out the front nine.
That's great. AscensionCharityClassic.com, by the way, to find out more or to buy your tickets. Nick Ragone, Jay Delsing. I'm Dan McLaughlin. And, Jay, let's go back, and Nick mentioned Bellerive, how that has changed to an extent the landscape of what we see from professional golf in St. Louis, where you can get feet on the course. eyes on Tiger Woods, eyes on Jay Delsing. You know, they're guys that are the professionals that are out there, and it really has changed it because you got the BMW coming up and you have the President's Cup, which is going to be remarkable.
Danny, I bring my own gallery. Tiger seems to show up from I don't know where, but I got to bring my kids. I got to get my kids in town and rent some cousins or something like that. But no, Danny, what Tiger did the Sunday at Belle Reve in 2018 was remarkable in a lot of different ways. First of all, and my hat's off, and I love the fact that Belle Reve keeps their foot into professional golf and PGA Tour golf, the best golf in the world, and gets events here for us. Like you said, the BMW coming in 26 and then the President's Cup coming in 30. It's just fantastic to look forward to. But what Tiger did on Sunday, he played the front nine at Belle Reve in 32 and didn't hit a fairway. He hit it all over the place, and the people, they just kept following him. And I had a group out there that I was interacting with and hanging out with, and the roar would come up, and I'm like,
Tiger roar?
It wasn't a bird. It was a Tiger roar, and then there's no Tiger roar, and there's a Tiger roar for par, and then there's a Tiger roar for birdie, and it's just when he hooks this tee shot on number 9 over by the fence, between the bunker and the fence, and then wings the shot on the green. And I swear, I was standing right by that 9th green when he holed that 20-foot putt, Nick. The ground was shaking.
I remember that. You know, there's famously there's roars, there's back nine roars, and there's back nine Tiger roars, and there's nothing like it in golf. And that, you know, as Roger Maltby famously said, he doesn't move the needle, he is the needle. But I will tell you this, 5 years ago, the PGA Tour had no footprint in St. Louis. And then Belle Reve happened, then we happened. Now the PGA Tour has 3 properties, the President's Cup, BMW, Charity Classic. We went from having none to the only market in the country with 3 PGA Tour properties, which I think the Charity Classic has a lot to do with that. But more importantly, it's the engagement of our fans and the community. That's just really cool. Like St. Louis prides itself on sports wins. That's a really neat sports win to go from 0 PGA Tour properties, PGA of America is a separate body, to now 3. Pretty cool.
Guys, let's talk about this Champions Tour. Bernard Langer now with the all-time record for wins, incredibly at the age of 65, which means he's going to play the regular U.S. Open with an exemption at the age of 66. Nick, that's a guy that moves the needle as well on the Champions Tour.
Well, he does. One could argue, and Jay would love your thoughts on this, but Bernard Langer won 2 Masters. Most people sort of vaguely remember that, right? I think he won in 85 and 94. You could argue that his legacy has as much to do with his 46 wins on the Champions Tour, and more importantly, the longevity. He is turning back the hands of time in a way that very few professional athletes in any sport have ever. At 65, to be elite, playing a U.S. Open at 65. You can't do that. Tom Brady's amazing. He's not playing until he's 65. If pitchers aren't, nobody is. And so I would argue, and same with Hale. Now, Hale won 3 U.S. Opens. I think his U.S. Open legacy speaks for itself. But one could argue that Bernard Langer was a Hall of Famer prior to the Champions Tour, but his legacy is actually bigger than what it would have been if he never played the Champions Tour. And one could argue that the check he won, Danny, at the U.S. Open was bigger than the 2 Masters checks combined.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
What's interesting, too, is Bernard Langer has 3 PGA Tour wins. That's it. 2 of those, are the Masters.
One at Heritage.
Over 40 on the European Tour because he played so much over there. And that probably gets overlooked a little bit in the legacy of Bernard Langer.
Yeah, absolutely. And, guys, here's the thing that I want you to know about this guy. Besides, he's Nick, you've met him. He's just a terrific guy, super quiet, unassuming, very humble. He is still dealing with the yips with his putting stroke. If you watched him play on Sunday, that backstroke with his putter was shaking
So the question is, what is he doing? There's some people that think, is that illegal because he's got the extended putter that's up near the chest? And I've heard people say, boy, it's right on the borderline.
Looks
there.
Close.
Exactly, because you can't rest it on your body.
You can't touch any other part of your body, or otherwise it's considered anchoring. But to his credit, he had the tour officials come over and said, this is what I want to do. Is this legal? There's pictures, there's videos and all that. And they said, no, you're fine. And he would never, ever intentionally break a rule.
No, 100% agree.
He just isn't that guy. But if you watch that putting stroke, anchored or not, that thing,
A little jittery.
It would make a cup of coffee nervous. To
It was a little jittery.
That thing was scary.
You know what's impressive about Longer, Danny, is that, I got to see the last couple of years, a lot of these guys up close, and they're all amazing people. They all get that the Champions Tour is the ultimate mulligan in life. And even VJ, some of these guys who are notorious grinders have really loosened up, and they enjoy the pro-ams and meeting people and engaging. And Bernard does too, but I tell you, he's still all business. Like on the range, he's not kibitzing like some of these other guys and fooling around. I mean, he's still in grind mode. Like in the pro-ams, he's personable and talks to his partners, and he's great. But there's nobody out there, including like Stricker and some of the guys that are really playing well, David Toms. Nobody takes it more seriously, and I think that's why at age 65, he's still among the top 5 players on that tour, which, again, to me, if you just step back and look at in all of sports, this story gets underappreciated, that at age 65, not 52, 65,
exactly.
This guy is still an elite player in professional sports, and I just think that's extraordinary.
For both of you guys, I'll start with Jay. What do you think Hale Irwin has meant to the Champions Tour? And I'll ask you too, Nick, but a local guy, obviously, local ties, one of the best golfer to ever come out of this area. Mentioned the Haas's, Jay Williamson, Jay Delsing. There's guys that have come out of this area that have been outstanding, but what did Hale mean to the Champions Tour?
Well, Hale's a tough customer. He is a gritty competitor. He's a tough son of a gun, I'll tell you. And when you don't get anywhere without being tough and winning 3 U.S. Opens, period. And I believe, Nick, is he the only guy in the history of the sport to win exactly 3? There's a few that
nobody's won exactly 3.
Won exactly
I think Willie
3.
Anderson won 4 or 5, and Hale won him. He won 74 at Winged Foot, which to this day is still the most brutal Open in history. It was like penance for Johnny Miller, 63 at Oakmont. He won 79 at Inverness, and then Medina, which was one of the all-time great stories. I mean, he was written off, and he had a renaissance in his career after winning Medina, because in the 80s he didn't do much. Wins Medina, and then comes out on the Champions Tour and absolutely dominates. And I've got to know Hale well. I think the world of him. I think he's been a great ambassador, certainly for our event. But his 45 wins after 50, including the Open win, again, he had a second act in his career that, the sport is fickle, Jay. You look at Ian Baker, Finch, and Duvall. When guys lose it, it's really, really hard. I mean, Ricky Fowler getting it back is the exception. When guys lose it, it's hard to get back. And for a while in the 80s, Hale lost it. He got it back and came back with a vengeance.
I can remember, guys, we were playing down at Hilton Head, and I was walking into the club trailer to get some work done on my clubs, and Hale was there. And, Nick, Hale's not a real gabby guy. He just doesn't really, go out of his way to converse with you too much. And I said, "Hey, Hale, how's it going?" And he goes, "I don't even know what I'm doing out here. This was in the late 80s." And then he turns around and wins a U.S. Open later on. So the game sucks because it's so hard.
To Hale's credit, had one of the most iconic moments in the last 30 years, him running around that 18th green at Medina, slapping, high-fiving the fans, which, again, he wasn't known for that. And it was such an out-of-body, and I've talked about it with him, and he said it was a total out-of-body experience. Like, I was so overjoyed. He said, "I didn't realize I did that until I saw the tape." And to me, it's still, there's things that you remember. I mean, Jack, yes, sir, in 86, what Vern Lundquist called, but
yes, sir.
Yes, sir, which he lifted from Ben Wright, by the way. Ben Wright had made that call on 15 about 20 minutes earlier, and Vern Lundquist gets all the credit for that. But Hale running around 18, Watson chipping in. I mean, there's certain things that just stick in our mind. That's one of the great moments in the sport.
Nick Ragone, that is Jay Delsing. I'm Dan McLaughlin. I know when people tune in, maybe hear my voice, they say, "Why? He's talking golf. Let's talk a little baseball." So one of the things I'm going to do, I am going to talk a little baseball when we come back, and it concerns quite a historic moment in baseball with a guy that Jay Delsing knows awfully well and knew awfully well. We'll do that coming up.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Cardinals avoided the sweep in Miami. They take down the Marlins 3-0. Jack Flaherty had an outstanding performance, 6 2/3 innings for him, 9 hits allowed. He had 5 strikeouts on the night. They'll head to Chicago now to take on the White Sox in a 3-game set. Jordan Montgomery gets the first of that series for the Cardinals. It'll be the righty Dylan Cease for the White Sox, who's 3-3 this season with a 4.10 ERA. And Derek Gold from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch tweeting out, Jose Fermin is expected to join the club in Chicago for tonight's series. Tomorrow night, St. Louis City SC will have a match against Toronto FC in Toronto, who is 3-10-9 this season. They're winless in their last 7, Toronto is. They've only scored 1 goal in their last 4 games. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and LondoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
No Tim, he's on vacation. I'm Dan McLaughlin. By the way, a week from today, I'll be filling in on the fast lane for Jamie, and I'll be with Anthony Stalter. Great to be with you on this Friday, and along with Jay Delsing and Nick Ragone from the Ascension Charity Classic. Away we go as we're talking golf up until 11 o'clock, and then Alex Ferrario will be with you. So some people, when they hear my voice, may associate it with baseball every once in a while. It's only 25 years, but whatever. So they're expecting me to talk baseball. I love talking golf. Obviously, the baseball season has been a little down this year, but I had a story that I wanted to make sure and get out over the air. For fans that haven't heard this, it ties into Jay Delsing. Your father, Jim, was a major league player, and I think this is one of the most amazing stories in the history of baseball. I really do.
Yeah, you know, I don't even know where to start. The fact that the DeWitt family, who are dear friends of yours and just great St. Louis ambassadors and citizens, are right in the middle of this thing, Danny, is just incredible. So I think
let me set it up.
Yeah,
okay, so let me set it up. He's playing for the St. Louis Browns. There is what we now call a little person in Eddie Goodell, and
3'7".
Thank you, 3'7". And so Eddie Goodell was going to be used as a pinch hitter. Frank Sauce was the batter at that time, and Eddie Goodell takes his spot. It's a wild promotion from Bill Veeck, and he's saying, "Okay, we're gonna take the guy out there, and he's going to hit," which is one of the famous stories in the history of baseball. But it ties into Jim Delsing and now Jay Delsing.
So, Danny, here's a couple things that my dad didn't like to talk about this story very much. He really didn't.
Why not? Why not?
I don't know. I think he felt a little embarrassed about it. I mean, he loved the game.
How tall was your dad, by the way?
He was taller than 3'7". He's about 5'10". He was about 5'10". But what's interesting is this was the second game of a doubleheader,
right?
And it was on a weekend. And so what Bill Veeck had done is sent all the paperwork to the office on either Thursday or Friday. So it was all legit, but they hadn't seen it yet to nix any of these ideas.
And they were, later we found out, they were going to nix this.
Yeah, they didn't like
this idea. Do it.
So additional background that's interesting is Bill DeWitt Jr.'s father, the original Bill DeWitt, was the general manager of the Browns at the time. So he worked for Bill Veeck. And his son, our current owner of the Cardinals,
Bill DeWitt Jr.,
was the bat boy. And so the uniform that Bill DeWitt Jr. wore, he gave to Eddie Goodell. They put the number 1/8 on the back, and off they go. And the catcher's kneeling, and the pitcher's throwing underhand, and 4 pitches, they walk. And then my dad, pinch run. But I said to Dad,
your dad was the pinch runner for Eddie Goodell.
So you buried the lead there, Jay. Your dad, is a footnote in history here. He was the pinch runner.
He absolutely was. And I said to my dad, Dad, how did you keep this under wraps? He goes, no one knew about it. He goes, I had 2 base hits in the first game. Look up the lineup card. And I said to Zach, I think Zach Taylor was the manager at the time, and he said, Delsing, just go sit over there. And I said, so what'd you do? And he goes, I just went and sat over there, and so nobody knew this was even happening. And then this little person comes out of the clubhouse and walks up to home plate, and everybody's going, They have no idea.
So the amazing thing about this, as we advance the story, and it ties in today, and Jay, you touched upon it there briefly. So the owner of the Cardinals now, Bill DeWitt Jr., was the bat boy, as you said. He took off his uniform to give it to Eddie Goodell. He was a very young kid at that time. I asked the DeWitts, which is now every once in a while the uniform will be displayed at the Cardinals Hall of Fame and Museum. But at one point, that uniform was passed down on Halloween to the kids. So you have a famous uniform in sports, the Browns uniform, worn by Eddie Goodell, worn by Bill DeWitt Jr. And he said for a while, he's like, well, kids, needed a costume for Halloween, so we just passed around the uniform.
One of the great artifacts in sports history.
Oh, it's
That's
enormous.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
so
what a great story.
They did that.
Well, that's the family of the DeWitts, too. They're so down to earth. They're like, yeah, just go ahead and, you can wear it if it still fits you, and you could be a bat boy for Halloween.
Now, your dad's uniform, Missouri Historical Society, correct?
Correct. Is the Browns, the uniform that my dad wore is in the Missouri Historical Society. Man, I'd love to have a Browns uniform. I've got a 53 Detroit Tiger uniform that he wore. And, Nick, these things are burlap.
I mean, heavy, thick, under that hot
double
sun.
Headers on the weekends.
Oh, my God.
It's crazy.
That's when men were men, right?
Absolutely.
The greatest generation.
By the way, speaking of baseball, John Daly threw out a first pitch, and it's still one of the more remarkable first pitches I've ever seen because he was there to promote the Ascension Charity Classic, and John Daly decides to try to fire it into the crowd. Nice work there, Nick.
I mean, look, it got us a lot of publicity. JD, first of all, is a diehard Cardinals fan.
Huge.
He's from our area.
He sends me texts, and he sends me
Huge
updates of how he's
fan.
doing.
Huge
Yeah.
fan. And also a good athlete. He kicked a field goal, from 40 yards out. I mean, he's no longer quite in that shape, but a great Cardinals fan. And we've had great luck. I mean, David Tom's threw at the first pitch. And by the way, speaking of baseball, I was really happy to see Harrison Bader back in town and the way the fans love him.
And too.
We, Brian Williams and I, Senator Williams, we took him to Cardinal Glennon 8 hours after he lands at midnight on Thursday. He's at Cardinal Glennon, not for 20 minutes, by the way, for 2.5 hours, meeting with the patients, the kids, meeting with the nurses, the staff, thanking them. And they all want to know what happened to his hair. But he signed everything. And,
Yankees got to cut it.
Yankees got to cut it. But we, this, Joe, we use the word role model in athletes way too often these days. But Harrison is truly somebody that you can have your kids look up to. And I was just glad to see the fans continue to embrace him.
Nick, what a lot of people don't know is that he represented and supported our Ascension Charity Classic through many of the banquets. He was there early when we had the announcement over at Glen Echo. This guy, he took a lot of his own time and just showed up.
On
it was
his
really
own.
impressive.
He showed up. The APGA Classic, which is our other tournament, which is really about making golf more diverse and inclusive. He reached out and said, hey, I want to come to your presser. You remember that event. You were there. It was snowy on a February. He flew in. By the way, he flew in for that. Flew in to be a part of it. And I was like,
tell you this,
that
by
guy's
the
a
way,
leader.
I emceed it. And I had to catch a flight. That was the next day was the start of spring training.
Yeah.
So he made a point to be there on that day.
It was pretty impressive, and I just I appreciate the Post-Dispatch did a nice column on his unbreakable bond with the fans here, and it's good to see him playing great. By the way, and you know this, Danny, and I grew up in New York. I know Yankee history, even though I'm a Met fan. They've had some really amazing postseasons. Reggie in '77, his 5 home runs. Mickey Mantle had some epic postseasons. Harrison's postseason last year,
awesome.
One of the best in Yankee history, which says a lot.
Yeah, what happens is, too, it takes me back to like Indy Chavez, you being a Mets fan. His catch in 06 would go down as maybe the greatest catch in postseason history. Game 7, Shea is rocking, takes away a home run, turns it into a double play. The problem is, and the same thing with Bader, it becomes a footnote when you don't win.
Yeah, man, you brought up Waino's curveball to Beltran. It curved space and time, and it careened the Mets into the wrong direction, but we're not going to get into that.
I want to talk to, before our next break, APGA and what that means to our community and just how big that event was on what a tour can bring to a city and what the city can do for a tour.
Yeah, I mean, our APGA Classic, the APGA, it's a developmental tour. It's about making golf more diverse and inclusive. Now, thanks to us, by the way, because we and Farmers and Oracle, a couple major companies are leaning into it, they now have developmental status, Jay, with the PGA Tour, meaning the winners now are going to get, eventually status onto Corn Ferry and the PGA Tour. But last year, our event at Glen Echo, to a person, they said it was an elite event on their tour, more fans, more hospitality. They engaged with a lot of our sponsors. A lot of these guys aren't going to make it to the PGA Tour, but they're getting exposed to the larger business community. And I got to tell you, we're really, really proud. I mean, we created the Charity Classic for two reasons. One is to give back to the community, and we do that through our charity with the Urban League Boys and Girls Club in Marygrove. And the second part was to make golf at the elite level more diverse and inclusive so that more people could see, hey, even if I'm not a professional golfer, this is a game I could play for life. And I feel like, Jay, the APGA has done that nicely.
Nick, it's been amazing. And and you're humble about this, but the Ascension, your organization's involvement in the APGA, the Classic for sure, but you guys created what was a ripple effect in the business community, because I think Epson came on board and
Doherty Solutions.
Doherty Business Solutions, Ron and his company do a great job in supporting us, but around the country, many big players stepped up, and so now these guys are actually playing for quite a bit of money, way more than they ever thought.
And great courses. They're at Baltusrol, they're at Torrey Pines, they're at Valhalla, Farmers, Oracle, us, a lot of other Lexus, big companies. And it's really, you know how hard it is, Jay, to get on tour, and it's even harder to keep your card. And to have the APGA be a developmental tour for the Corn Ferry Tour, which is a developmental tour for the PGA Tour, it's really, really important to have that status. And last year, our winner played in Worldwide's event. Worldwide was so gracious to give a sponsor's exemption. They've agreed to do that again, which is really cool. So it's a game-changing moment. You get an event, you get to start in the PGA Tour, you catch lightning in a bottle, could change your life.
Change your life. It absolutely can change your life. Yeah, and we got to give a shout out to Christian Heavens. He's a great ambassador for the Ascension Charity Classic. A great team member, local guy. Yeah,
and playing some good golf, by the way.
Easy to root for.
And Tim O'Neill, who got his start last year at the Charity Classic, made it through Q School and is playing really well. He's been on a bunch of leaderboards. He's an Ascension brand ambassador. And I just love the APGA Tour, and I love the connection between the Champions Tour and the APGA Tour. And that's, again, St. Louis.
Nick Ragone, Jay Delsing, I'm Dan McLaughlin. We'll wrap things up in just a moment. You can also find us on YouTube on the 101 ESPN page, and that's former shows, podcasts, things of that nature. It's on the website as well. Nick Ragone from the Ascension Charity Classic is our guest, as well as Jay Delsing. I'm Dan McLaughlin. And Golf with Jay Delsing, to promote this, will be on every Sunday. Brandel Chambly will be the guest on Sunday morning, so looking forward to that. I got to ask you, Nick, speaking of YouTube, now you become a YouTuber, man. You're all over the place. You're a millennial. That's millennial. Nuts.
I've written 5 books on history. It's one of my avocations. My wife says keeps me out of trouble. 5 books on the presidency, and so I've had a passion for history. And about 3 months ago, I was watching YouTube, and I'm like, there's no great storytelling on here. And I called my brother, and I said, we got to do some video vignettes. And 3 months later, 90 days, we have 17,000 subs, 4 million views, and we tell historical vignettes about World War II, about the Civil War, about these great American exceptionalism. I believe we're still a great country. It's like an unbroken streak through our history. So one quick story. This video got 2 million views in the last week. D-Day, Jay. It's June 6th. The paratroopers that went in first, it's 12 at night. It's pitch black. They're in the C-47. There's 200 of them, the 101st Airborne, 200 sitting there. They're nervous. They're jumpy. One of the guys, a guy named Robert Hillman. This is a true story. Robert Hillman starts fidgeting with his equipment, which they do, last minute check, right? He looks at it. He notices parachutes from the Pioneer Parachute Company, which is in Manchester, Connecticut. He lets out a little bit of a guffaw, and I'm going to choke up, by the way. He lets out a guffaw, and the guys go, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm from Manchester. My mom actually works at the Pioneer Parachute Company. He looks at it for another 30 seconds, and he lets out a semi-yelp. And another guy goes, what's your problem? And he goes, you're not going to believe this. He goes, my mother's initials are on this parachute.
Wow.
Guy got a parachute from his mom. I mean, talk about,
that's crazy.
You could either think that's coincidence or divine providence. I think it's divine providence. I mean, and there's so many stories from the greatest generation. And so what my brother and I are doing is we're telling these in little vignettes, because it's important for younger people in particular to understand the sacrifice and commitment of those that came before us and how important that is to the history of our country going forward.
Leads me to this. Jay, you're passionate about this. All of us were together when the news broke, but LIV and the PGA Tour coming together, a lot of people look at that and say, how can you be a part of it? Other people are saying, the hell with it. It's okay. Let's move forward. There's ties into 9/11, obviously, speaking of the history of our country. So where do you stand on that, being a guy that was such a part of the PGA Tour for 30 years?
Yeah, well, it was blindsided and kind of feeling betrayed is the first couple things that I thought of. I mean, our commissioner sat there and basically just talked out of both sides of his mouth within a couple week period of time. Danny, I've got way more questions than I have answers. I've been texting a lot of buddies and friends and guys that are a little more in the know.
This is not a slam dunk yet. I mean, this is going to take some time.
There's congressional oversight that's going to be there. There's lawsuits. What do we do? I mean, Nick, how do you feel about this as a partner and our sponsor?
It's a tricky question. So there's 2 pieces of it. One is it's not a done deal yet. There's still a lot of regulatory and business hurdles. Like, they have the broad brushstrokes of an agreement, but there's still detail that needs to be worked out. The second part is, and I wish Jay a speedy recovery. Jay is out on medical leave, and he's been a big part of this.
Jay Monahan,
the commissioner of the PGA Tour. And so in absence of him being on leave, there's some uncertainty. Now, the initial feedback from the players, the PGA Tour players, was there was a lot of anger. They didn't like the hypocrisy and so forth. They had a recent meeting last week where it seems to have calmed down, and now they want to understand the details of what the plan looks like. And the thing to keep in mind, again, for this community and our sponsors, is that this is a new company being formed between the PGA Tour and the PIF, a for-profit entity, and that underneath it will sit the DP World Tour, the PGA Tour, and potentially the LIV brand. It looks like it might not go away, and that the events like ours remain a 501c6 so that we could give back all our proceeds to charity. But, Danny, it was interesting. At Valderrama, LIV's last event last week, Greg Norman and Yasser were driving around in a cart. Yasser is the head of the PIF. And so there was speculation that Greg would get fired and LIV would go away. Well, they were around together for 3 days, and Greg was driving him around in a cart. So I'm not so sure the LIV brand is going away immediately.
Yeah, he's been quiet, which has been interesting. Not a lot of public comments, if any at all. I haven't seen him. I want to ask you, too, about, and Jay brought up a good point, how it affects the Champions Tour, but also LPGA Tour. You're talking about the atrocities of Saudi Arabia and how women are treated. boy, you've got to wonder long and hard about what you're doing, not only on the PGA Tour, but the other tours as well.
Yeah, I mean, guys, we're 3 girl dads here. We all have daughters. I mean, that's no good.
Yeah.
I mean, that is no good. Again, way more questions than we have answers. And one of the things, guys, it just is about money. It's about money. When you think it's not about money, it's about money.
Always about money.
It's always
about the money.
But
quick shout out for the women's game today. This week, they're at Pebble for the U.S. Open, which is very, very cool. It's great to see Pebble hosting a U.S. Women's Open. It'll be Annika's last, most likely, and Michelle Wie's. Generationally different, but 2 icons of the women's game. And I will tell you, the women's game has never been stronger, and it may be some of the most interesting golf on the planet right now.
I think what's very important that we need to get out is that you are trying to affect, in a positive way, both guys. And Jay grew up in North County. That's where the Ascension Charity Classic will be. It's at Norwood Hills Country Club. It's in great shape. We played it a bunch. It'll be perfect for that time of year in September. But Jay, I know it means a lot to you. Nick, I know you specifically wanted to get to North County to have a positive impact on those communities. And I know, Jay, that means a ton to you.
Oh, this event checks every single personal and professional box for me. And I've said it 100 times. I won't say it anymore. But Danny, you also have your special needs tournament up at Norwood Hills.
Yeah.
It's raised over $5 million in its inception. So
Amazing.
This game, guys, is a societal powerhouse. It just keeps delivering.
And Danny, we're lucky that you've been such a great ambassador from day one, you and Jay, and to have you helping out this year. We have our Legends Lunch coming up, and you're going to be participating in that. And then our Legends Challenge on that Saturday, which Jay did that last year, and I'm glad Jay's in the field. It's a tough job, Jay, trying to moderate Lee Trevino and Nancy Lopez and Hale. And so, Danny, thankfully, you are a pros pro. You're the best in the business. Jay did a great job, but we feel like it's a little bit of an upgrade.
No, Jay knocked it out of the park.
Are you kidding?
Jay did a great job. He handled Lee Trevino well. Lee is a firecracker.
Well,
man.
You just don't want to get too close to Lee because he'll grab the mic right out of your hand.
Isn't that the truth, though?
Oh, well, hell yeah, for
and
sure.
by the way, Nancy's coming back, and Nancy asked me if she could come back, and
That's
she,
great.
to me, is one of the great ambassadors, so we're happy.
So, Nick, as we wrap things up, and with Jay Delsing, Nick Ragone, I'm Dan McLaughlin, let's get the charities that will be receiving those monies coming up in September. And you guys, before even one ball was hit, made a donation to these charities of considerable amounts of money. So tell our fans about that.
So again, year one we were canceled, but we still gave $250,000 to the Boys and Girls Club, Urban League, and Marygrove, our 3 primary charities. We have about 10 others, and the year after, the second year, we gave $800,000. Last year, $1.3 million. Just to put it in context, in year 2, we're already the most charitable tournament on PGA Tour Champions, which has 35 events on its calendar. Year 2, I said at our press conference in year 5 we wanted to be one of the most, and again, that's not a credit to me or the team, although they've done an amazing job. That's a credit to St. Louis.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Guys, this is fun. I wanted to get into the Ryder Cup. I wanted to get into Ricky winning, but we ran out of time.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. That's Jay Delsing. You'll hear him on Sunday. Golf with Jay Delsing, Nick Ragone, and I'm Dan McLaughlin. Thanks for being with us. This has been the Balloon Party on 101 ESPN.